Welcome back. In this video, we'll be looking at equations of straight lines. In particular, we'll be learning how to calculate the gradient of straight line and figure out missing coordinates. If we do know the gradient, we'll be looking into how to figure out the intercepts, y-intercept and x-intercepts. So let's look at the definition of gradient. You should know from previous studies in maths that the gradient is change in y divided by change in x. So that means that by changing y, we are figuring out what is this height or the distance between the y coordinates. So this y coordinate minus the other y coordinate. Now, it really doesn't matter. You don't have to picture a graph to figure out the gradient. As long as you look at your equation, your coordinates. Let's say we got 5 and 3, and we got 7 and 8 here. So if we say 8 minus 3, that goes on the top. This y coordinate is 8 minus the other 3. We started with this coordinate here. Okay, so because I said 8 minus 3, I have to start with 7 and subtract 5 from it. So the order has to be preserved. If you do that, you get 5 over 2. Okay, now let's say we didn't start at 8. That's not essential to start at 8. We could have started at 3. If we said 3 minus 8, if we started here, then for the denominator, we would have to start with the 5 because we started with this coordinate here. So we would say 5 minus 7. Now the answer for this part is minus 5 over minus 2. Now that also simplifies to positive 5 over 2. So the answers will be the same no matter if you do it in a correct order. It doesn't matter. For whichever you start to subtract y's, you make sure you do the same for the denominator. Alright? So with that, let's look into another problem. So it's always changing y on top of the fraction. Okay, so this was changing y, different y values, divide by changing x. So most students get the order wrong. They put the x's on the top and y's in the bottom. Don't make that error. So let's look at this first. We have to calculate the gradient between these two coordinates passing through these 2 points. So as I said, it doesn't matter. If you start with 7, you're subtracting 5 from it, then you have to start with minus 2 and you subtract 4 from it. We will have 2 over negative 6, which is negative 1/3. Alright, so if you started with the 5 and subtracted 7, that's fine, as long as you do the same with the denominator. So you would start with 4 and you would subtract the 2. Now, subtracting a minus 2, because there's a minus in the coordinate itself. So make sure you put 2 negatives here. Most students, again, make sign errors. They think, oh, I already have a minus sign. I don't need another one. Yes, this sign belongs to the 2, and this is part of the formula. So we'll get negative 2 on the top, and 4 minus a minus 6 actually makes it 4 minus a minus 2 makes it positive 6. So this also simplifies to 1/3. Let's look at another example. In this next example, we have been told about the gradient. What's missing is the y-coordinate of one of the points. So we do know the answer here. So we write it in the form that you would have calculated the gradient, and we write the answer in front of it. So we'll have minus 5 minus a equals divided by 2 minus 4 equals to minus 1. So this is an equation that you can solve. Minus 1 is because that's the gradient that we've been told. So this denominator is a negative 2. I'm going to multiply it by minus 1. So I'll have minus 5 take away 5 equals to minus 1 times minus 2 is a positive 2. Now solving this equation, I can add a to the right and subtract 2 from both sides. So I'm doing two things at once. This a was minus, so I added it to both sides. So adding a to both sides disappears, make it disappear from the left, appear on the right, and this positive 2 I've subtracted it. So we'll have a minus 7 equals to a. Alright, so a has to be a minus 7. So let's look at the next example. Here, well, this is not an example. This is just to show you how we make up the equation of a straight line. There may be one way of writing the equation of straight line is this: y equals to c. The value of c is this y-intercept here. All right. So whatever the coordinate of x is always 0 on the y-axis. You know that by now. All right. So this x is 0, and this coordinate of y is the c value that we put here. Gradient is what m that we figured out in the previous slide. So you just multiply that by x, and that's the equation of straight line. Now you might be you might have been asked to rewrite the equation of straight line in this form. We'll look into how to do that in a second. So in this example, we've been asked to write down the gradient of y-intercept. So the y-intercept is, you just simply read it as to the, so the gradient and the y-intercept. So the 2 is the y-intercept, and the gradient is always the number in front of x. So that's to the left of x. Okay, don't be confused. Number that multiplies by x is to the left of x. Might be a fraction as well. You can read it as a fraction. So in this next example, we have to rearrange it into y equals to something so that we know what's the gradient in this intercept. We can't read it just like this. Be careful. So first we have to make y the subject. Okay, that's the skill you had to learn in the prior knowledge test. Didn't make y the subject. So we're going to, let's just let's start with the 4x. Let's just keep 4x and 5 on the left and add 2y to the right. Because I see there's a negative in front of the y, negative 2. I add it to the right and then divide by 2. So I'm dividing by 2 here. So I'll get 2x and 5 over 2. Now you can read the gradient and the intercept. This is the gradient and the intercept. So we write the intercept as 0, 5 over 2, because we know the coordinate of x-intercept is over the x value. The y-intercept, its x value will be 0, and the gradient is 2 here. All right. So in this next example, we've been asked to write it in this long format here. Alright, so we have to bring x and y's on one side of the equation, make sure it's equal to 0, and if there is a fraction, we need to make it a number. Okay, I'll show you how you deal with fractions in a minute. So first of all, we have to either subtract y from both sides. So that's one way of writing it. 4x minus y plus 3. Alright, I'll just squeeze y in between the other two. It doesn't matter which order you write it. So the number in front of y is a negative 1. Alright, that's one way of writing it. So it's the same way as writing it in this way. So they're both similar. You get marks either for writing this line or this line, they're both correct one. Alright, so now here's a fraction. I told you you might have a fraction that you have to deal with. So first you need to make it a linear equation by multiplying by 2. So we'll get 2y equals to negative x plus 5. Actually, this 5 also needs to be multiplied by 2. Okay, don't forget the 2 multiplies by every term here. So when we timesing by 2, the left, right, imagine you putting a 2 in front of the bracket in front of this equation here. So 2 multiplies by this and that. So don't make an error there. Then finally, we can just bring everything on one side of the equation. So you need to add x and take away 10. So we'll add x to the left and take away 10 from both sides. We get the 0. This is the format they want you to write. Now you might have a different sign. This is the same as having taken the rest like having a minus x on the right and minus 2y on the right. They're both the same thing. These two lines are equivalent. Now, okay, so x plus 2y minus 10 is exactly what we had here. If you wrote x first and 2y, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing. X plus 2y minus 10 is still the same thing. All right, so let's look at the next example. In this question, we've been told the equation of a straight line, and we've been asked to figure out at what point does it cross the x-axis. All right, so just picture it like so. This has a gradient of 4 and a y-intercept. We already know the y-intercept is 8, and the gradient is positive, so it looks something like so. So I can already guess the p x axis where it cuts the x axis, x value has to be negative because x's are negative on the left of y. So how do we do it? We just said, what's the y value here? Here, look at it. Y's here, y's coming down from 8, 8, 0, okay? So the origin is x and y 0. The y value remains at 0 on this line and the x-axis, okay? We've discussed this many times before if you've watched my videos from previous chapters. So you set y value equal to 0, 4x plus 8 would be the equation we're solving for x. So first take away 8 from both sides and then divide by 4. So negative 8 divided by 4 is a 2, a negative 2. So it makes sense for x value to be a minus, have a minus sign. Alright, so that's, we already know the y value. It does say coordinate, so you do have to give the answer as minus 2 comma 0. Don't forget that. If they ask you for a coordinate, you do have to give it in a bracket form like so. This is a comma, alright? So I know some international students, they numbers with a comma. This comma is separating two integer values, two numbers, okay? This is not a decimal comma. Some people they write 2.5 as 2 comma 5. We don't do that in English. In England, when we put a comma here, that's separating these two numbers, okay? These are not the same things, alright? So that's the x coordinate and that's the y coordinate. Alright, so I'll see you in the next video.